And now we are going to move into a panel, which I don't honestly like describing others or their experiences, and so I'm going to let them all self-introduce and take it completely from here. I can say their names. We have Derrick Twene, Juan Ruiz, and Daniel Kish. But I think they are perfectly capable of speaking for themselves and far more capable than I would be of describing them. So
Okay, so I've said already far too much about myself and already delivered a presentation. So I'm not going to talk as much about myself, but I just want to lay out our intention for our group panel. The idea basically is for us each to share a bit with you from the blindness perspective, from lived experience. There is far, far too little lived experience of blind people being understood in a professional context, even as in a cultural context. It's very ocular-centric in the sense that sighted people love to talk about blind people and just assume that the perspective laid down by sighted people about blind people is the perspective that we should recognize. And we're basically here to challenge that. So, the format essentially will be Juan and Derrick. You've already been introduced to Juan from the Guinness World Record. And by the way, in case you did not recognize him, the little boy who said, "If you guys can see with your eyes, we can see with our ears," is also Juan when he was 13. He was our poster child for a bit. He's still our poster child. Anyway, so
never grew up.
So he'll talk about himself. I've known Juan since he was 11, and he was essentially, you could say he was my first student, or one of them. Juan was part of a master's thesis, my master's thesis, in human echolocation. I did it as a developmental psychologist, and I had 24 blind children from ages 3 to 14, I believe. And Juan was one of those students, and he had made a great deal of progress through the training that I provided. It was basically an experimental training course in echolocation. There were no training courses to speak of. In fact, I had to invent a training course in echolocation just to use for this experiment. There were no other documented training courses. This was back in 1993, 94. And so Juan and I just sort of clicked, and so to speak, we clicked. And he and I stayed friends of the family. And then time went on, and I began actually training Juan. Juan started helping me with my workshops. He started helping me with my presentations. He started helping me with some of my students. We went to Mexico together. That was our first training trip out of the country, really. So Juan provided translation services, and also Juan just helped me make this happen services. It was an incredibly intense time working with groups of Mexican blind kids for a week, and then we went back the following year for I think almost 2 weeks, and then my Spanish was good enough at the time that I went back on my own for a third year. Anyway, so fast forward, Juan can tell you more specifically. He's now in Austria. He provides heaps and heaps of workshops all over German-speaking Europe, and I think you've also been to France.
Yeah.
And has provided ample hands-on training to what must be hundreds now, at least, of blind children and adults, as well as professional development workshops for orientation and mobility specialists all over Europe, despite the fact that as a blind person in Europe, he cannot get certified to teach. But we'll have him teach anyway. Right? So, and then Derrick Twene, Derrick came to me a bit more recently. He basically contacted me just as the pandemic was hitting. Just as the pandemic was hitting. He emailed me, he explained the situation, he's losing his vision, he heard about this echolocation thing, he can tell you more about that. But I thought, I can't help him, I can't get to him, I can't really provide him with anything, I can't really, do anything for him. And so I sort of put the email in my I'll get to this eventually folder. I kept getting emails though. he kept sending me these emails. So finally I responded and we arranged a WhatsApp call and I said, I just can't get to you right now. We're basically locked down in the US. We can't get into Europe, but go see Juan. And he went and saw Juan in Austria like days before they locked down Europe. And so Derrick also has designs and is working on becoming an instructor, a mobility instructor. He's already working with some students. And Derrick and I have traveled actually pretty extensively by now to various places. So the idea is for everyone to kind of talk about themselves in the context of self-determination, of what it took and what it takes to achieve self-determination in, today's society, as a blind person, in today's, ocular-centric, sight-dominated society, as a blind person, and for each person to just sort of provide a context for us here to understand. Once that's done, we may curate a discussion, a conversation amongst the three of us that further touches upon or deepens these aspects around our lives and self-determination and learning some things about blindness and about living as a blind person that a lot of you might not know or may never have thought about. Professionally, educationally, personally, etc. And then it is our intention to provide ample time, maybe a good 30 minutes, for Q&A, where you can ask any of us anything. All questions welcome. So at this point, who wants to go first?
I'll take it over.
You want it? Okay, all right.
I got it.
So you have a microphone?
I got one.
Yeah, okay.
All right. I learned from the master to not be able to stay still either. So I've actually been, I've dedicated my whole life to moving around, really, right? Because as a blind person, it's not so easy to master the ability of moving around. And once I now have developed the skills and the abilities to do that, then that's what I teach now, to teach people to be as restless as I am. I've traveled around 30 countries or so, all without assistance and whatnot, in the middle of anywhere from nice, beautiful streets of Austria to, hiking the Grand Canyon 4 times and all kinds of stuff, right? So I have quite an extensive background of doing some wild things and things that people used to tell me that I could not do. When I began wrestling, I also was told that was not possible because one was blind and I'd be the only blind person, and it would be a disadvantage. It was an advantage at the end of the day. When I decided, hey, I'm going to take automotive technology and go repair engines, people said, no, you're going to hurt yourself, you'll probably kill yourself. I did it anyways. And I still got all my fingers and toes. But where did this all start? I'll share with you one of my earliest memories. And one can say that I never liked borders. That's why I moved from Mexico to California to Austria. But what I mean with that is I was about 3 years old, and I was, just a kid trying to learn how this world was built and how wide this world. And I was limited in the small little town that I lived in Mexico, right? Very few people, I don't know, 2,000 people or so. And I remember being in my backyard one day and I thought to myself, well, as a 3-year-old, there's a fence here. What is behind this fence? Is this the end of the world? It was my 3-year-old mentality or so. And so I said, no, this can't be it. I hear stuff behind it. And so I very, very quickly learned to try to figure out how to obtain more information acoustically. So one of the things I did, I thought, okay, well, there's a wall here. There must be a way to figure out what is behind this wall. And so I found stones. And I started by throwing one stone over the wall, and it fell on concrete. And that was the beginning of my artistic experience, because I began to acoustically gather information and paint a picture of what was on the other side of that wall. Then I threw another stone, and it hit a piece of metal. I threw another stone, and I hit concrete. And another one, and it hit a different part of the concrete. Now, that's important. The picture becomes more and more clear with every stone that I'm throwing, and it's really painting quite a clear picture of what is on the other side of this wall. So my picture became more and more full. And that's how I move around through life, really experimenting with sound and knowing how to use sound, how to understand sound, and give every sound a meaning. It is amazing how little most poor-sighted individuals use sound. Sound is a gateway to really tons of information. And very few people use sound in the way that blind people use it, and also a lot of times blind people use sound a little bit less than Daniel and I use it. No, sound changes all the time. It's really complicated. So, I'll give you guys a really quick example. How many of you guys have ever thought about how the floor sounded like? Or however, how many of you guys have ever thought what a table sounds like? It all depends on so many factors: structure, thickness, materials, what's on it, what's not on it, how it's standing. That's something you can hear without using echolocation. Now, that's the whole world. The whole world sounds different depending on how you touch things. And it keeps on going. This is just a tiny, tiny example. But what that all does is it provides you a picture as a blind person of what you are encountering, what you are touching. And it is important for the reason that the cane is a conductor of all this tactile information. It provides the individual with precise information of what you're touching. It's just the way one sees a visual image with echolocation is also the way one sees an image with the cane when you touch something with your cane, not only because of how it feels, but because of how it sounds. There's not enough research, students, just a hint on this type of stuff. So, that being said, we move on to echolocation, where echolocation is also, in a way, simple, because, you know, when you touch something, it makes a sound. When you click, or you just listen carefully, you get some echoes that one can translate into information that one can use to move around. You know? That's simple, and it's easy to learn. But here's where it gets complicated. It gets complicated because just the way that one touches the table somewhere and it sounds differently, just because you moved position, because of the structure, that's the way the whole world sounds depending on where you are standing in space. So for example, if I turn my head and speak to the left, it sounds one way, but then if I turn my head to the right, it sounds a different way. And sound behaves that way even if you move your head at a I don't know, 15-degree angle. 15 degrees. That's enough to really give you a much different perspective of your environment. But that's cool. That's really awesome. Because that allows you to essentially have a measuring tape in your head. You can really precisely tell how far you are away from things just by listening. Yeah? One can tell that the next centimeter at touching the wall. Very precisely touch things with your cane. One could place things strategically in the room and then be able to find them because of the way it sounds given distance. It allows you to avoid obstacles and or strategically come and touch obstacles or people. Yeah? It allows you to do things like, one second. I don't know. Find the middle of the room or something like that between the two walls or something. Yeah. But anyways, I'll leave you guys with that because I'm used to giving 2 or 3 day workshops and we don't have that kind of time. And then I'll pass on the mic to Derrick.
Do you want to? Yeah.
I was in the middle of the room. Here you go.
This is cool. I can find you. Okay.
And you calling me a small Mexican?
Yeah, midget. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. I'm Derrick Twene. I come from it from a different direction. I come from it from being sighted just 6 years ago and then losing my sight. I come from it from having a very powerful job, so as a director, managing multiple teams on different continents, having all the innovation, having all the portfolio, having all the strategic dialogue going through me, to being completely blind and being told by the company after spending 1 year on campus in an institution to learn how to be a good blind person in the Netherlands where I live, that, oh, now that you're blind, we don't want you anymore because the optics for me being outside and going to all these large corporate companies, it's not good. So these companies, global companies, have all this diversity and inclusion, they say it in their strategies, but they don't actually live up to what they're trying to say. So after 1 year and 3 months of being trained to do Braille, being trained to do how to iron, how to cook, and do all these wonderful things, and I was asking the mobility instructors who were all sighted, hey, I'm really struggling to go out at night because my functional vision is completely gone. How the hell can I get out and navigate myself so that I can be the same person as I am now, was back then? They said to me, well, Derrick, it's not possible. You have to be born blind to be able to use this echolocation. It's impossible. Sorry, you can't do anything. I said, what we can do for you, though, is that you can go outside and use a torch. So when you're walking around, you just put a torch on the ground, and then you can see where you're going. Now, anybody who's got any bits of functional vision, when you put a torch on the ground, you see the light, you look out again, it goes completely black. So it's absolutely useless. So I left there after 1 year and 3 months, tried to do my normal life, tried to get on with it, tried to be the normal person. I couldn't. I was struggling to literally walk down the road. Because as soon as you step out the door, one thing that you have to realize when you're blind, every day is a new experience. You don't know what you're going to encounter because your world is quite small, because I don't know how to do echolocation. I didn't know how to do a lot of things. So Daniel said I sent him emails. I was stalking him. This man is terrible. Then he tried to get rid of me by sending me loads of literature. I read his literature. I went, thank you very much, Daniel. When can we meet? Daniel's, no. You have to read my book. So he sent me his book. I read his book. I said, Daniel, I read your book. Let's have a dialogue. Had a dialogue with him on his book. And he went, yeah, okay. I'm not going to get rid of this person unless I find someone for him. And that's when he found one for me, and which has absolutely changed my life. So lockdown comes in. I go to Austria. And Juan goes, oh, you have to come and find out where I live, come over this place. I went to his house, met all his whole family, and we started immediately. Now, I had a little bit of functional vision, not as much as I have now, so I blacked out myself with some ski goggles, so I couldn't see at all. And I said, I'm going to go for full immersion. Full immersion. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it well, and I'm going to come out like Daniel Kish after 1 week, echolocating like a ninja. So what happens? One gets me out. Come on, Derrick, we're going to go in here. Okay. I'm wandering down the road and think, oh, Derrick, there's a lamppost over there. Be careful. Okay. See the lamppost? No. Yes, Juan, I see the lamppost. And we got to a point where there was a crossing, huge crossing in the middle of the road, and one teaches you that, okay, what you have to do to get the crossing is line yourself with the building across the road so you know where you're going. I did that. He said, okay, right, time to cross. So I started to cross. This is me crossing. And I hear from one, Derrick, you're going in the wrong direction. I said, no, I'm not. Carried on like this. Next minute, I hear his footsteps, grabs him from the back, drags me across the road, puts him on the ground, says, Derrick, what are you doing? You could have got killed. There was traffic going everywhere. And I went, no, this guy is blind. I took my goggles off, and this is me. And he's going, I thought, my God, this guy is blind. He's not lying. He's not lying at all. And that's when I realized that echolocation actually freaking works. Because the man, being blind, was tracking me going into the traffic and still got me and brought me back there safely. I went, okay, this stuff really works. Now I'm going to pay attention. So then one's taking me through the underground, through the trams, completely blacked out. And there's me on, Derrick, Derrick, listen, you can hear the leaves. Oh, that's a broad leaf. Oh, that's a small leaf. Can you hear that, Derrick? Oh, of course I can, Juan. Of course I can. Couldn't hear nothing. Nothing. So after like 5 days, I was demoralized, completely demoralized. So one gave me like a bit of a win. He took me to a park, and there were these big trees with spaces in between. And he's like, okay, Derrick, we're going to walk. Okay, click. Hear a tree? Yeah, I got that one. Okay, put your cane out. It's a tree. And just getting that small win was the beginning of me being able to sort of stand up and think, I can do this. Once you know that you can do this, then everything starts to open up. And then lockdown came in, I went back to Netherlands, and I started to train myself, going out every day, trying to find poles, trying to find trees, just trying to echolocate wherever I could. It took me quite a while because you just don't think that you're doing it. You think to yourself, it's not working. And it took me another 6 months to a year to when I went to see Daniel that I realized that you actually, just from practice, you get better and better and better and better. And what's happened to me now is that the fact that I can echolocate is basically open up my world. Because it's not just echolocation, it's that you step out the door, you're more confident, and the most important thing is that you know how to get yourself out of trouble. Echolocation is great, but you have the confidence to get yourself out of trouble, whether it's using tools, whether it's using echoes, or whether it's using asking people. Because what I noticed when I was at the Institute, the people who have gone blind like me from a later stage, they lose their confidence completely. Most of them won't even go over a cane. Most of them won't even scared to use, just to go around the corner because they feel they're not the same value as, say, you guys who are sighted. And the amount of people who were there having all this psychological treatment just to get over that mental barrier is huge. Every single one of them was struggling. And what I see now, and I had a discussion with the team today, this morning when we was having breakfast, is that what you see is that, yes, we're blind, we're visually impaired, but what you see is that 90% of them won't step out of their door now still. And which is really upsets me, really upsets me. But Daniel's done some presentations like in Norway, and what you see is that the more that you're in the West, the more that you're taken care of. I mean, I can sit in the Netherlands and do nothing for the rest of my life and be fine. You go to Norway, they have an assistant. There's somebody there to literally wipe their bottoms so to make sure they're safe. So when you got to that kind of level, it stops you from trying to explore, so you literally become a very small person. And that's something I couldn't live with myself because I like to be active, I like to run, I like to jump, I like to do everything. I cannot get rid of my race bike because I saw Juan, or listened to Juan, cycling around thinking, one day I'm going to get on my race bike and use it to go around the Netherlands. One day, I hope and pray, but we'll see. So the echolocation, working with Daniel, working with Juan, has just given me that huge amount of confidence to be the person I am, to be able to achieve what everybody else can achieve, and to be able to stand up and tell to everybody, there are no limits, there's nothing that we can't do. It just takes a little bit more time, a little bit more planning, a little bit more strategy, then we can get things done. Yeah? So there's nothing that we can't do, there are no limits. Just remember that when it comes to our slot. Okay? And I shall pass back to somebody else. Oh. Lost my orientation in space and time, so out comes the cane.
So, well, I've learned a few things. I didn't actually know about the stone thing that Juan told when he was 3 years old. So he started his life of hooliganism early. I was waiting for, and I threw a stone, and I heard broken glass.
Ouch.
I was waiting for that. So we have a little bit of time maybe before we open it up for question and answer, and I have a question for each of you. Juan has spent the last basically 10 years or so teaching, like ardently teaching, and so and Derrick has not spent as much time teaching, but certainly plans to do so, and has worked with me with a number of students. So my question for Juan is, in working with students, do you have a particular experience with a student that really stands out for whatever reason, whether it's a student having difficulty with something and then overcoming that difficulty, or a student who who affected you a certain way in terms of what they've learned, or maybe what they really were challenged to learn? Does there anything like that come to mind?
A lot of the times what happens is that students kind of doubt themselves based on what they know about blind adults and what they don't know about blind adults as well. A lot of blind individuals, children, do not have access to people who are blind and out there in the world doing things, exploring, and kind of just living their own lives. I remember one time I was with one student in Germany, and we were sitting on top of a tree. We had climbed up a tree. He was about 14 years old, 15 years old of age, and we just started to have a nice conversation on top of the tree about life and limits and blindness and everything else. And I talked about my hobbies, and he talked about some things that he would like to do. And so then I left. I spent 2 days with him. We went out to Hamburg and visited an automotive museum, because I'm a big automotive fan for no reason. And after I left, I did not talk to him or see them for the next 6 months. And when I came back, I had learned that he had bought himself a motorcycle that did not work, and he learned to repair this motorcycle with his father. And then, not only did he go that far, but they created a system through Bluetooth headsets where his father would drive behind him on his motorcycle and would guide this blind kid through fields on his motorcycles. And I thought, yeah, that's right. Bring me with you. And then...
Oh, there's more.
There's more. A couple years later, we had another chat. He's like, hey, Juan, I'm going to buy my Interrail ticket and travel around wherever the day takes me. And that, I thought, whoa, this is a guy with that really understood what I was trying to teach him. And he was traveling around, not only staying with friends or on hotels or whatever, but this kid was on a daily basis finding camping sites, hiking, hitchhiking, doing it all just to get it done.
Thank you for that. That's that's very inspiring. That's really, really cool. Cool to hear. Derrick, I'd pose the same question to you, and if you want to answer the same question, that's fine. But you have an additional project that you're working on that that maybe you'd like to talk about as well. And for the reasons you have behind that project. So yeah, whatever you like.
Yeah, what I didn't add to my small curriculum vitae that I was talking to you about is, as you can see, I have a beautiful skin color, lovely and brown, not from the sun in Bristol, but born with it. I come from a Ghanaian family, and my Ghanaian family is from is royal. So you're standing in front of a bona fide prince, everybody kneel before me. No joking. So effectively what that means is I have responsibility. So my uncle, who was the king of the region, died, but my cousin has taken over. But my uncle knew there was going to be some problems, so then what he did was annex a certain part of the kingdom to us. So I'm effectively taken over that part of the kingdom and will be inaugurated as the king of that in August when I go over with Daniel to do some work. Now, why I'm saying that is that having worked with Daniel with his NGO, it's really inspired me, because you see these young kids that Daniel's been working with, and you see them just begin to sort of grow into themselves, and you see them develop into sort of the great children or great adults that they're going to be. For example, like Juan and some other ones like Lewis, who is an incredible, amazing person on computers. And I thought to myself, well, if I look at the developing world, what do these children have? If I look at my country where my mother was born, because I was born in Reading in Berkshire, what do these children have? So then I decided that what I'm going to do is raise my own NGO to try and help these people in these disadvantaged countries. So I've just recently just raised my NGO, which is called ICU Africa. So basically it's not just for Ghana, but it's for the whole of Africa. And the purpose statement is bringing sight to the unseen, basically, bringing sight to the ones who are unseen. So basically, not just blind, just anybody who's disadvantaged is somebody we want to shine a light on to see how we can help them to develop themselves to be the best they can be. So the point is not to give them food and give them a fish, but to give them the tools, to give them the line, to give them the rod and the hooks, so they can fish for themselves and then feed themselves. So that's what I've started to do, and that really comes from working with Daniel and just seeing that there are so many disadvantaged people out there. And I can promise you, if you ever go to these developing worlds, and you look there, you see what the children are doing, they're just basically sat in a corner. They don't even have a cane for most of the time. The parents just put them away. If they're not going to kill them, if they say like, I have Down syndrome or something like that. And I think that's completely unfair, because these children have the right to be the best that they can be and grow up to be just like you and me. So I'm going to do my damnedest, even though I'm visually impaired and blind, to try and make sure that I can get these people to be where they want to be. And having the corporate background with all the global networks I've got, I'm hoping that I can get them to sponsor me, sponsor my NGO, so there'll be enough money so that we can just set up programs, whether it's educational, whether it's training programs, whether it's farming, just so that these people can actually help themselves. And that's what I'm currently working on, and that's what Daniel and I are going to be going to Ghana, but also to Cameroon, to go and see what we can do to assess and what we can do to help. So I've been really inspired by everything, and that's what I'm trying to do now. And the idea of me being the king and the chief is that I can use the lands I own to then set up little farming projects, so that I don't need to go begging for people to give me land, to give me things. I have the availability of the land, the farming land, so I can set up projects for farming, I can set up things for recycling, whatever they need, I can try and set up little sort of small cottage industries that they can use. And what I want to try and do is use the expertise that they have in Africa already. For example, the waste plastic, there is so much of it there, but there are some smart people in Kenya who are using some very clever ideas to get the plastic, make it into some sort of composite and use it to make roofing tiles and things like that. And those are the kind of things that I wish you guys can come to me and say, hey, I know something, this might be useful, it's going to be low cost, and maybe we can use it to try and just better the world and better the people and their environment in these countries. So that's what I'm trying to do. So any ideas, I'm here, and I'll pay you a little bit for it, honestly. In kisses.
Beautiful. You give the best kisses, Derrick.
Oh, you know that.
So, Derrick was talking about working with blind children, right? And so, when we talk about the things that we are teaching everybody, we're talking about perception. And so at what age do we start working with children on using sound, on using the tactile sense, on using the echoes? I typically start giving children canes at about the age of 6 months. Yeah? I can get a child to respond to a wall that is near him or her at about the age of 10 months. Get them close to a wall and have them reach out and touch the wall at the age of 10 months or so without them ever seeing, just by moving them back and forward, close to the wall, back forward, singing, playing, making noise, having them listen to the echoes, having their body come have some contact with the wall. So this is not something that is difficult to learn. In fact, studies say that if you have no experience with echolocation whatsoever, it actually only takes 15 hours of training to be able to incorporate echolocation in your daily life, as long as you keep on practicing. So this is quite easy stuff to learn.
One of my students was having a heated discussion with one of her instructors. I think she was 17 at the time. And I had worked with her off and on since she was 5, actually. And her instructor, in a response, basically said, well, when we go through our training course, we're taught to shy away from Daniel Kish's methods because they are dangerous. We have a politician in the U.S., one of the good guys, who passed away recently. His name is John Lewis, and he was a very, very prominent and very, very powerful, very prolific black activist. Okay, back in the '60s, they were called blacks, and he was a black activist. And he actually had his head staved in, at demonstrations and things like that, knocked unconscious and so forth. But he raised all kinds of cane, and really, really, along with Martin Luther King and so many others, got things done. And he had this saying. He basically said, it's worth causing trouble as long as it's good trouble. Because without good trouble, you don't get change. So we're here hopefully to help promote some good trouble. Okay, so we're going to open this up for questions. I can be the runner, but if I'm to be the runner, then... Okay, I was going to say you have to raise your hands loudly. There we are. So, all right.
Going to run it down?
Yeah, to whoever seems most desperate. You have to show your
Most desperate.
We have desperation neither.
Okay, I'm seeing desperate people. Come to you first.
Thank you so much. My name's Linnea. I work in sound art and sound studies, and also in sort of the sonic urban design, maybe sonic design of urban spaces. And I was hoping maybe all three of you maybe even could speak a little more about the relationship of self-determination and aesthetic experience. Because sort of traditionally, or what does an environment have to provide to become interesting, to be beautiful, to be sonically relevant in a way that's not just sort of navigational by necessity for navigation, but also for aesthetic pleasure? And what can we maybe learn from that for the design of urban environments to be interesting from a perspective of echolocation?
We had a little discussion, me and Linnea, yesterday. And I told her about some of my experiences that I have had at some churches and how upset I am at everybody using sound deadening materials to isolate, to absorb all the sound, because there's a lot of nice sounding places that now do not sound so nice anymore. Round spaces tend to generate a lot of interesting echoes and reflections. Domes also tend to generate some good echoes, and some of my favorite ones where you say something like hello and it goes hello, 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 forever on. And those are the very rare places to find. Some people think that caves may sound very interesting. Some may, but may not. Every little factor in the environment has a role in how the environment sounds. If the seats were placed in a different position in the room, the room would sound different. If the room had no carpet, it would sound different. If the seats were made of plastic or wood instead of, I'm thinking German stuff, Linnea, soft materials, it would sound different. If corners were round and not square, it would sound different. If there was no curtains, it would sound different. Everything makes a difference. And it just depends on what you're trying to do, of course. And yeah, things with more echoes. What would you say, Daniel?
Well, here, I'll take. Oh, do you?
No.
Okay.
I'm using the regular mic.
Yeah, okay. Well, Derrick wanted to go next, so why don't you have a microphone? Yeah.
For me, I really now appreciate the dawn. I mean, I think it was David or who put no, it wasn't David. It was, I forgot his name, the last speaker, where they're doing a lot of auditory with the birds.
Oh, yeah.
I find that incredible. I wake up practically 3:30 every morning to catch the dawn, and I will sit there in the morning with the sun coming up, because it's almost like the sun is singing to you now, because I can't really see it. And it comes up, and you get this, oh, and you get the birds going, and it's absolutely beautiful. And if I'm going for a walk, then you've got the wind, so you've got the, and it just makes you feel completely alive with the trees swaying and those kind of things like that. It's absolutely beautiful. And I remember now, like, when I could see and I was running or jogging or walking, I completely missed all this. Now I've got the time and I can just feel the whole space around me with all that beautiful sound. And every morning I would sit and meditate and just listen to all that beautiful chorus coming through. And there are certain birds who are my favorite, you know. The certain one does a, you think, oh, okay, that's the one, I've got that one. That's in G flat, okay, I'll play that on my saxophone. Can't do it properly, but I try, you know. So that's what I love. I say that's the sound stuff that if you guys can just take a little bit of time out and just listen to that, your whole world just becomes completely enriched. Your blood pressure drops down, you become completely calm, and you can face that new day with vigor and things like that. That's the part I love so much about it all, to tell you the truth. So.
What they said, you know, it's highly personal. What's aesthetic to blind people is just as personal as what's aesthetic to sighted people. I think the biggest issue is to encourage, you know, to remove barriers to exploring, to just being able to physically get out there and explore. I mean, Juan here at 3 years old, you know, he didn't really have a special environment that beckoned him to find out more about that environment. He had the internal drive, the intrinsic drive to find out more about the environment by, you know, chucking stones over a wall. I did the same thing at roughly the same age, climbing over a chain link fence and wandering around the neighbors' backyards until I was half a block down. Oh, this happened at 3 in the morning, before someone finally discovered me and had me returned home. Now, important question is, how do you encourage that curiosity? How do you encourage that exploration? I think one of the things I will say that, you know, is background noises can make things a bit harder. You know, so if you live in a noisy environment, in the inner city, for example, or I remember one time I was at a school for the blind, and I was working with students at that school, and I walked by the lunch area, and I just shook my head thinking, it is so loud in there. It is so loud in this lunch area. How can anyone, you know, have a conversation? How can anyone really enjoy themselves? And I was really glad I wasn't in there, right? And as a child, I wouldn't have been able to be in there. I mean, I would have just wilted and not been able to function, and, you know, I would have been non-functional for the rest of the day. Well, the next student they brought me was this autistic girl who had been in there, who they brought from lunch, and she was literally quivering. She was so disrupted, so dysregulated. This poor girl probably went through this every single day, every single lunch, and would have spent the next, you know, who knows how long, dysregulated after that experience. which is an extreme experience, and her situation was arguably extreme. But in working with her, I spent the first maybe 15, 20 minutes just being quiet with her, to the point where, you know, we could have a whispery conversation back and forth, and then gradually increase the volume of our conversation. It's just, it would be lovely if we were just less oculocentric and more acoustically aware as a society. We've lost that, very much so. I don't know how we get it back. It wasn't always that way, but it is that way now. And I guess one of the things I would do if I were, you know, teachers of blind kids or parents of blind kids or what have you, is to just really train ourselves, kind of like what Derrick just said, train ourselves to be more acoustically aware for the sake of our students, for the sake of our blind children.
Now, one thing to think about is how can you now interact with your everyday environment in a way that you are more acoustically interacting with your environment. I'll tell you what, every space has something beautiful to hear. And it would be things that one would never even think of, like light poles, right? So everybody should just carry a cane around with them, I'm telling you. Because you can get to touch anything with the cane, and it makes a particular sound. And again, you know, the bottom of the light pole will sound different than the middle of a light pole or the top of a light pole, and all these different materials. They could all be acoustically interesting. You know, I have a nice little bottle here, and depending on sounds completely different based on how I hold it. So just your everyday environment would sound interesting if you interacted with it differently.
Thank you for the question. Other desperate questions?
Hi, thanks so much. Got lots of questions, but just one quick one really was about the how the sound is vocalized and how important that was in terms of it coming from self-vocalizing versus, you know, I've got a clicker for my dog for training purposes, and whether the sort of the time, you know, that you've got to create the sound, how critical that was versus synthesizing a sound, and are there some sounds that are, do you change the kind of the sound that you make in different environments? I'm just really intrigued to know more about that, and whether there are people that can't vocalize that are synthetically echolocating in some way with some kind of clicker. So that was a few questions in one, but just interested in.
So the science is actually fairly simple. It can get a bit involved. Basically, there are certain characteristics that make an echo signal effective. If we look in nature, the signals are generally very brief in duration. We call them pulses. Even with dolphins, when you hear them, you know, buzz, you know, that kind of thing, those are, in their minds, in their ears, as near as we can tell, those aren't buzzes. They're just trains of clicks. Very short, very loud clicks. And their brains work such that they seem to be able to process each individual click cycle in what to us just sounds like, you know, buzzes. And bats are similar and so forth. So the idea is that the signals need to be brief, you know, they need to be bright, they need to be sharp, they need to be quiet enough to work in close quarters, in quiet environments, yet loud enough to work at extended range in loud environments, or if you're detecting things at a difference. There's a real strategy to echolocation that animals who echolocate use, and that proficient human echolocators also use. The important thing though is that the most important thing is that you're in control of the signal. So you decide what that signal sounds like. You decide when that signal is active, when it's, you know, emitted, because your brain sort of primes itself to the signal that you've created. It doesn't necessarily have to be a tongue click. You know, some people use finger snaps. I'm rubbish at snapping my fingers, so I don't use that. You can use hand clickers. Some people use their cane taps. But the important thing is that you have the most control you can have over the signal. Its duration, its timbre, the directionality of the signal, so basically where the signal goes, where the primary emission energy goes, and that you can replicate the signal. So you want the signal to have some consistency because your brain kind of develops this familiarity with the signal, and the more familiar the brain is with the signal, the easier it is to interpret echoes.
Just to give you some examples of what some clicks that we may use is it could be something as quiet as, yeah, that just gives me enough spatial information to move around within a meter or so without running into somebody. And if I'm in a very quiet environment, I don't want to walk into an office going, yeah. We may walk into office going, click to our left, click to our right, find the borders of the room, the corners, which gives us a lot of spatial information. Very importantly, to figure out where the free space is. Where there is free space means that you will not crash into something. And then if we're really looking for something outdoors where the cars are loud and we're looking for, I don't know, to see whether there's a building or a bush across the street, we might, click a little bit louder. So it just depends on the situation, and that click can change from second to second, minute to minute, situation from situation. And there, you might even go through periods of time where you don't even click at all.
Yeah, I'm slightly different. So being a scientist, I tend to change the pitch and timbre. So I will go from, and that helps me sort of get the density or the structure of the actual object that I'm trying to locate. Because sometimes, you've got a car which is flat and it's metal, then maybe next to a post or something like that, and I can't quite work it out, so then I just change it. And then that sort of bounces off and gives me, oh yeah, that's the car, because I can hear the window or something like that. And if I use a hand clicker, it only gives me one tone. It's just that, and that's not enough for me to get the information that I need to sort of light up my visual cortex to tell me what exactly it is. So I use a different tone, sometimes even in tunnels. If I'm getting close to a tunnel or trying to find a passage, I will change my click tone to a, just so that it sort of brights up that area and I know exactly what's in there, if there's people in there, if I'm going to get mugged as I go through the tunnel or not. So I'm preparing myself. So yeah, that's how I tend to use it. So very good question, actually. Very, very good question. Thank you.
I'd like to see the mugger who would target Derrick. Probably not too likely. Any other desperate questions?
Hi, my name's Georgina, and I'm going into third year of biological sciences at UW Bristol. And I was just wondering, you guys have mentioned how sighted people are the ones who run a lot of the mobility, like courses, and Derrick said, the institute he attended after going blind was all taught by sighted people. And considering the echolocation and what you guys have been working on isn't, super new, why hasn't that been taken up by some of these courses? And what are the barriers that, the community's facing, stopping that from being taken up? And how could that be overcome? Thank you.
Anyone's guess. You guys have any thoughts? What the heck? We don't really know. I think it's very novel for sighted people. It's maybe not the easiest thing to wrap your mind around. It's not that the skill's terribly difficult to learn, but one of the things you have to do to learn the skill is really immerse yourself in the skill, which means that a sighted person would have to pop themselves under blindfold for extended periods to learn this skill. We know that people can learn this skill because there are mobility courses who train blind instructors in the US who do exactly that. And these sighted instructors spend some 400 or 500 hours under a blindfold, and they learn, blindness skills pretty well, and they really come to understand a blindness perspective pretty well. That is not how much time the majority of mobility training courses put their instructors under blindfold. It's more like, 20 hours or something like that, maybe 50 hours. And that's true here in the UK. Very little time is actually spent under blindfold these days.
Here's another phenomenon, is that it's always those people who do the extra who actually get really good at things. Right? I have an instructor in Germany who's sighted, and he learned from me through a workshop, and he kept on practicing and practicing. In the evenings after a workshop, he would blindfold himself, go explore. He got to dangerous points where sometimes he was in the car and would close his eyes, and I don't think that was very smart, but he was just so obsessed with figuring out how this all worked that he eventually learned to be as good as myself or Daniel. But he did it after all.
Yeah, it's what it takes. And yeah.
Sorry, one more thing is that all of these instructors who learn to be instructors for the blind, after their education, learning how to function in a sighted world requires the development of tricks and tips that come with only experience. And if you never, again, after your education, put yourself under blindfold, which is about 99.5% of the people that work with blind people, then how could you?
I think there are other nuances as well. I think that we've fallen into a situation of how good is good enough. It's good enough. Mm-hmm. How we teach is good enough. We've been teaching, the same way for however many decades. It seems to be good enough, seems to work, seems to move people from point A to, halfway toward point B anyway, but how good does it have to be? And I think we've settled on standards that we as a society and as a blindness profession are comfortable with. Now, obviously, the three of us sitting at the table here are not comfortable with, but the profession as a whole is just comfortable with the standards that seem to be regarded as best practice from tradition, from cultural acceptance. Humans tend to take the path of least resistance. How much harder would our profession have to be to commit itself to training people, blind people en masse, to do the kinds of things you've seen us do today, to do the kinds of things you've seen these kids do in these videos today? It would take a monumental shift in perspective, a monumental shift in appreciating that, we really could be doing things a lot better. We really could be doing things a lot differently. And very few professions, I'm not just picking on the blindness professions, very few professions will do that. Most professions go through a kind of glacial, process of, they either go through a glacial process of change or they go through some sort of cataclysmic upheaval to change. And the blindness profession is much more glacial. It hasn't really gone through a cataclysmic upheaval yet.
Just to add to that, there's also that part of stigmatism, sort of, you look different. So when you're clicking, they don't want you to look different because they can see people in your environment take a look at you and think, oh, what's that person doing? And they don't want you to stand out, so they feel embarrassed. So, I've done it with my mobility instructors, and they said, oh, you need to stop that because people are looking at you, you look funny, so stop that, and just use your cane, and I'm here next to you. So there's a lot of that because they're embarrassed, but they don't realize that you click and 10 seconds later the person's walked past you and they've completely forgotten who you are, what you're doing, and everything like that. So there's a lot of that, and depending on the mobility instructor, how they feel, they tend to sort of personalize your experience, and they don't want you to embarrass them in public, so they don't want to teach that. That's what I've noticed for myself personally.
few more questions. We'll come down the end and then we'll come back.
Hi there. Hi, yeah. David here. Yeah. So presumably you guys are the cream of your profession, which I'm so proud to and honoured to meet. But how do you, and I don't want to, by saying this, I don't want to devalue at all what you're doing, because I think the beauty of sound and the complexity of sound that you've talked about can only be celebrated. But how do you deal with failure? Because presumably most of your students fail to get to anything like your wonderful achievements. How do you? And I guess it's linked to what you were saying just now about professional standards. Presumably, I'm guessing that most people are much below your lofty, wonderful position.
Let me quickly say to that, because there is no failure. It's data collection. So when you click and you don't find what you're looking for, or it's wrong, it's a data point. So your brain will go, oh, yeah, that's not the door, that's something else. So there's no real failure, it's just data acquisition for me. So that's the way I try to teach it to people, that you haven't failed, because that was my problem all the time, was that I couldn't do what one was doing. I couldn't tell the one leaf from another. But when I clicked, I got some sort of audio feedback. And then if you go back and touch it, okay, your brain starts to take that information in. Yes, it's not a pole. Yes, it's not a wall. It's softer. It's something. So there's no failure at all. It's just a different data point, which you then acquire, and your brain just amasses all that information and then sorts it all out. That's the way I've managed to get through it all.
Levels of success, not levels of failure.
So it's not measuring success by, by how close they get to my level of proficiency, or Juan's level of proficiency, or Derrick's level of proficiency. That's not the measure of success. The measure of success basically is improvement that improves the quality of your life, improvement that you're comfortable with. I'll give an example. So we have a boy in Scotland. His name is Ethan Loch. You can look him up on YouTube. He was a piano prodigy by about age 9. He's now 20 or 21, and he does world-class classical concerts on a regular basis. So he's a piano virtuoso from a very, very young age. And he really, really, really struggled with mobility. After years and years and years of echolocation, yes, he made improvement. The biggest improvement was just an awareness that there was space outside his own head. Okay? And that was huge. I mean, please trust me, that was an enormous accomplishment for him to really realize and attune to space outside his own head. So someone said, someone basically criticized the training that we were providing him, essentially by saying, he'll never be like Daniel. He'll never function like Daniel. And I took exception to that from several perspectives. First of all, who says he should be, like Daniel? Like that's just incredibly short-sighted. But secondly, let's suppose that I took the same tack, or let's suppose, look, 99% of the people who try to learn to play piano will never play as well as Ethan. Never, right? If I spent the rest of my days on this planet, I could never learn to play the piano as well as Ethan. But most people learn to play the piano quite tolerably well. Most people, if they really, apply themselves, they can play the piano. They can play for their friends, they can play for their own entertainment, they can accompany. Most of them are not going to take the world stage. But why should they? Who cares? So that's basically how I look at this issue of measuring success.
Thank you very much.
Other questions?
Hello, my name's Chris, and I'm asking as a sighted, curious explorer who doesn't want to go to instructor level, but would nonetheless love to find out more about echolocation. And my question is, what options are available for people who would like to get that level of insight, that level of discovery, that aha, that's what it's like, that level of skill, just to know it works and go, okay, I like this.
Yeah, we're open to all kinds of options, actually.
Yeah.
We're from group trainings to workshops to one-on-one trainings. I'll tell you what, 1 or 2 hours of training is enough to give you that aha moment.
Where does that come from?
Well, I mean, you can contact one of us.
Yeah.
So feel free to contact one of us. There's some sort of DIY materials that we've developed that can help people get that sense. There are workshops. Juan has done sensory development workshops. I've done sensory development workshops and corporate development workshops. So corporations have actually hired us at times because you pop a bunch of sighted people under blindfold and you teach them a bunch of skills and they all go aha, and then your brain lights up and people find that they become more creative, they become more motivated, they become more determined. It basically opens your mind. It blows out a lot of calcification that most of us suffer from in one form or another. So we are working on, in fact, one of the reasons I'm here at Bristol is looking with Dr. Keane to work toward a virtual training platform that would be broadly available, that would provide a curated set of training courses that would be available to answer exactly that question.
Any more hands? No, I think we might all be questioned out.
All righty.
Thanks so much for your attention.